Hello there, my name is Thomas O'Regan, and over the last 3.5 years, me and my wife have built an 11 property portfolio. So when it comes to negotiating property, I know a thing or two. Now, what I want to tell you guys about today was negotiating, a few tips on negotiating. Now, when you're negotiating, the more knowledge you have in general about property or about the market or about this specific property, the more power you have in a way. The more you understand, the more levers you can pull. By demonstrating how knowledgeable you are to the person, your adversary that you're negotiating against, can really pay off in terms of getting a favorable result for yourself. And in turn, knowing and getting an understanding of how knowledgeable your adversary is, the person you're negotiating against, is very useful. Okay, so for example, you might have a real estate agent. Real estate agents are not all created equal. There may be a real estate agent that's selling a property that has no idea about the marketplace where they're selling the property. And you might think, that's crazy. How would that work? It happens. Look, there could be an agent selling a property that's from 50 k's away, and he never drives around the area, but for some reason he got a listing in a place that's very far away from him, and he just simply is too busy to understand or know about the marketplace that he's selling the property in. So for example, like, you could be an investor looking at a marketplace and say, okay, this market is about to take off. It's been in a big slump, and a similar situation right now would be Victoria. Victoria's in a big slump. Some people might not know it's about to take off, but most savvy investors do know it's about to take off. And you could argue or you could, say with the agent, look, this market's in a terrible slump, and because the agent's not knowledgeable about what's going to happen in the marketplace, you might say, yeah, okay, I agree. I mean, and then you could say, okay, look, it's in a big slump. You should give me a discount because this is quite a risky property to buy at this time. There's no market activity, and so on and so forth. So the more knowledge you have, and the more knowledge you have about the person you're negotiating with, the better deal you can get. But look, today I just wanted to talk about two different types of markets, and so two different types of situations you'll be negotiating in. Either you'll be negotiating in a hot market, or you'll be negotiating in a softer market. So I always prefer to negotiate in softer markets because I can get bigger discounts. I can get property under market value much easier because I'm not competing with people that are also trying to buy the property. It becomes very hard to negotiate good deals and properties when you are competing with a lot of other people. So I don't like to do that. I like to do a lot of research in finding markets that are not taken off yet, but have a lot of potential for growth. And then I go into those markets, negotiate the deals, get them discounted from the market rate that it is already, and then purchase the properties like that, and then get the upside when the market takes off, and from the benefits of negotiating the deal under market in the first place. So with properties that are the market's not very hot, you can start with a very low ball offer, and it honestly, people think, oh, you might offend the agent, blah blah this, blah blah that. But if you take a long-term approach to it and say, okay, like, I'm going to put an offer in on this property, maybe I'll put an offer in on a few other properties, and I'm gonna develop this offer over maybe like a week or 2 weeks or whatever, then it doesn't matter if you put in a low ball offer and people say, oh, what if you offend the agent? Look, it doesn't matter if you offend the agent. What you're actually doing by putting in a low ball offer when there's no other offers in sight is you're anchoring the vendor or the agent to a price that is more realistic. It doesn't have to be the price you settle on, but it's just saying, look, it's just whatever expectation you have, whatever expectation the seller has, it's pulling it down and saying, look, no, this is where it should be. And then once you let that sit for a bit with them, there's no other offers, blah, 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 you go on for 2 weeks, you come back and you say, hey, look, actually, I could probably come up a little bit if you're willing to negotiate. And yeah, no, honestly, I used to be really, really worried about doing this. And I always used to try and close a deal very quickly. But the reality is, if you're trying to close a deal, in a day, it's going to be very hard to get a good deal. But, sometimes the market's hot. Sometimes you need to close a deal in a day. But that's a different situation. It's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about a very soft market where you could put in an offer on property and you may be the only offer that there is out on that property for weeks on end. Okay, so soft market, put in an offer, lowball offer, anchor their price to something that is more realistic, lower than the price you actually want. That's the key. And then you negotiate with them over a long extended time period, slowly incrementally increasing your offer. And I can get more into detail on this later. To the point where you are close to, if not at, where you would be happy to purchase that property. If you just go in, it's very hard to put in an offer and then work backwards from there. You're like, honestly, it doesn't work. You have to, if you want to end at some number, say if you want to end at 300,000, you start at 300,000, then there's no room to move. You can't really do anything. It's if you ever had a negotiation with someone that says, I'll take 300,000, and then you talk to them later, and then you increase your offer, and then they say, I want 320,000 now. It doesn't work. It's completely retarded. Just if you're negotiating with someone, you're just generally going in one direction when it comes to price. So that one direction is probably up. So start lower than you want to end. You want to ultimately purchase the property. Yeah, you might start at, say you want to buy the property for 300, and they're trying to sell it for 330, and you say, look, I'm be willing to pay 250 for it. They're like, no, that's ridiculous. There's no way we're taking 250. No way. Okay, say, all right, well, I'm gonna go look at some other properties then. You come back in a few weeks and you say, hey, look, have you had some time to consider my offer? And now all of a sudden, okay, the vendor might accept like 290. Yeah, I don't really want to pay 290, knowing in your head that you'd already accept 300. Maybe if they did like 255, I'd be able to do that. And then you just keep bringing them down like that over a long extended time period. Only works in a soft market though. Hopefully, if you guys are investing in properties and you're negotiating on deals, this stuff will be able to help. But again, knowledge is power, so you need to understand what type of markets you're negotiating in the first place to know how to proceed with your negotiation. Okay, guys, see you later. Bye.